Wonderful to see you all here. This morning I want to talk about a subject that's probably going to get me into trouble, but I thought it's important maybe to speak about a hot issue in the Jewish community in Toronto right now. Before I say anything, I want to make clear that nothing I'm about to say is motivated by desire to disparage any other Jew or Jewish institution at all, God forbid. All I want to do is raise this interesting idea to provoke us to think and consider what it means and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or not. I want to talk about what our fellow conservative synagogue, Beth, has branded their generation's membership. For those who have not heard about it, according to their own advertisements, it is a Beth synagogue membership category available to any Torontonian between the ages of 18 and 40 who, quote, identifies as Jewish. I don't understand that last part. But what's really special and interesting about this membership is that it is completely free. And that's the part that's been getting the most attention, the concept of a free synagogue membership. Beth is not the first to have created this category, but we certainly ought to give them credit for the wonderful marketing that's driven this membership campaign. They have done a wonderful job getting the word out. Last week, I was in Vermont, and someone came up to me and said, "Isn't it wonderful what Beth is doing?" The campaign was promoted on social media and in the Canadian Jewish News and in many other places. And because of the tremendous promotion, many people have been coming up to me and talking to me about it, saying, "Well, what are you doing for us?" It was even referred to in one of our board meetings here at Beth Tikvah. So instead of having separate conversations with everyone, I figured why not discuss it respectfully from the pulpit, even though it may get me into trouble. And why not perhaps think more deeply about whether a free synagogue membership for young people is the right model and whether we and other synagogues ought to follow suit. Let's start with the positive and with what I'm assuming was the rationale. The 18 to 39 age group is notoriously the most difficult age group to engage in synagogue life. Among other reasons, it's because it is an age group defined by transience. They move through various life stages very quickly and frequently. Graduation, young adulthood, young professionalhood, marriage, parenthood, career changes. It all happens very quickly within that age bracket. And it is hard to cultivate and sustain relationships with a demographic that's always on the move. Those relationships are the keys to success in synagogue membership. And I would argue that today's 18 to 39 age group, what we call the millennials, are probably the most difficult generation to engage in synagogue life ever. Millennials are used to getting what they want quickly and over a screen and for free with limited human interaction. And it is a generation that tends to push against inherited traditions and rituals, like synagogues, like Judaism. So let's be clear, any effort to engage this age group ought to be applauded, whether we think it's a good idea or a bad idea, or whether we think it will work or whether it will fail. The statement that Beth marketing campaign is driving home delivers in itself a positive message. It says we care about millennials. We haven't forgotten about you. We care so much that we're willing to take a risk to try and engage you in synagogue life. That ought to be applauded. Efforts to lower the barrier of entry for this age group and all young families ought to be applauded. Efforts by synagogues to be more creative, to try something new, to be experimental with regards to synagogue membership models ought to be applauded. Good for them, for their willingness to try something new, challenge the status quo, and invest in new initiatives. I sincerely hope that their campaign will be successful. That said, I do think we have to think very carefully about the message we send and the unintended consequences of offering a free membership that is not needs-based to an entire demographic of young Jews. Some concerns. First of all, while the marketing could be spun positively, it could also be spun negatively. When a business is willing to give its product away for free or heavily discounted, it doesn't send a very positive message about its value. If you go to a restaurant and the owner charged you little or nothing for your steak, you'd wonder what was wrong with the steak. If a country club was offering you membership for free, you'd wonder what was wrong with the country club. If you go to discount outlets to buy clothing, as I often do, you'll find that the clothes at the discount outlets are the clothes that didn't sell in the market very favorably. And similarly, this free synagogue membership has been spinned by some to be an act of desperation on the part of the conservative movement. The line is, our shuls have failed to engage millennials with anything they find valuable, so we're giving away membership for exactly what they think it's worth, 0. And that's a promotion that doesn't make your product look better. It makes your product look worse. Second, doesn't a culture where we shower our young people with free stuff, absolving them of the responsibility to pay fairly for it, create a culture of entitlement? This week, actually, in the United States, there was a big debate about the Biden administration canceling billions of dollars of federal student loans for millennials. And lots of people are asking whether this is fair, given that others paid their debts responsibly, and what the moral consequences might be of this act of debt forgiveness. Let us not blame millennials for being the most entitled generation when we're the ones forgiving their debts, eliminating their responsibilities, and giving them free stuff. And millennials are entitled. With my apologies to the millennials in the room, this is not personal. Here is the cold, hard data. The incidence of narcissistic personality disorder is nearly 3 times as high for people in their 20s as for the generation that's now 65 or older, according to the National Institute of Health. 58% more college students scored higher on a narcissism scale in 2009 than in 1982. Millennials got so many participation trophies growing up that a recent study showed that 40% believe they should be promoted every 2 years, regardless of performance. I'm not sharing these statistics, and I could go on to embarrass anybody, God forbid, certainly as the new month of Elul begins. These are just the facts. They tell us what is going on with millennials and how we might not want to be encouraging and enabling negative personality traits by forgiving their loans, giving them the gifts of abundance without the costs of responsibility. Entitlement is a very dangerous trait and an unappealing trait, and as it becomes more pervasive, it will ultimately undo, potentially, the very community institutions that you seek to strengthen. Third, did you ever hear of the half-shekel contribution? We read about it back in Parashat Kitisa, and again on Parashat Shabbat Shkalim. Moses takes the census of the Israelites in the wilderness, and every Jew is required to give a half shekel, which goes to support the community institutions. The Torah says, He'ashir lo yarbeh, the rich man shall not give more, ve'hadal lo yam'it, the poor person shall not give less. Why would the Torah require the same contribution from everyone? It likely would have been a much more successful fundraiser if the rich gave more, even at the cost of the poor giving less. And it seems rather cruel to ask the poor to pay when perhaps they are struggling with their basic needs. But our sages teach us that when it comes to supporting religious institutions, the value of equality, of equal sacrifice and shared sacrifice is much more important than raising the most money. And giving dignity to the poor by asking them to contribute is no less important a need than food, clothing, and shelter. In God's grand plan, every Jew is valuable. If one person is born with physical strength and becomes a bricklayer, and another person is born with a sharp intellect and becomes a brain surgeon, each is making his or her own important contribution to society. Neither is more valuable or less valuable in the eyes of God, no matter what your T4 says at the end of the year. If you read Rabbi Dan Judson's excellent book, Pennies from Heaven, which traces the history of synagogues and money, you'll learn that it was this very egalitarian ideology that led to today's synagogue membership models in the first place, a model where everyone contributes equally. Today, for many different reasons, synagogues have been drifting away slowly from that model. I think Beth Tikvah has 300 membership categories at least. All synagogues offer discounted memberships to those who are in need. All do. Many offer free memberships for those who are recently married, so they can try out the shul. But to offer free membership for nothing seems to be a rather radical departure from the spirit and ethos that animated the half-shekel campaign, the most important fundraising campaign in the whole Torah. Remember, the half-shekel contribution was collected annually on the first day of Adar, throughout the time when the temple stood, to pay for the temple and its expenses and its sacrifices. This was your membership model. It existed for centuries. The poor cannot give less because even the poor own a portion of the service on the altar. Even the poor have to feel a sense of accountability and responsibility and belonging. And for the poor, that is not diminishing, that is ennobling. Giving membership away for free does diminish that sense of responsibility and belonging. When you get something for free, it just doesn't matter to you as much as something that you worked for and sacrificed for and paid for and contributed towards. And finally, I want to talk about synagogue membership as the idea of a covenant. To many people, the book that we're reading now in the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy, does not appear as the most engaging book in the Torah. It is often reduced to a succession of dry laws whose intricacies seldom resonate in our day and age. But seen another way, this book is a story of a nation being born and acquiring an identity not through the conquest of a foreign land or people, but by placing itself in a covenantal relationship with a transcendent power that we call God. It is a covenant that involves ritual. It's a covenant that involves justice. It's a covenant that involves proper interpersonal relationships and that involves support for community institutions. Covenant in Hebrew is brit. It is a concept at the core of Judaism. It is all about a relationship of reciprocal love, reciprocal caring, and reciprocal loyalty. The key word is reciprocal, a relationship that is not defined just by receiving, but also by giving. Jews demand many things of Judaism today, and many things of the synagogue. You become a member, I'm entitled to X, Y, and Z. But friends, that is an American consumerist pollution of what a synagogue is. Judaism is not a religion you demand things from. It's actually just the opposite. A religion that demands things of you. Ask not what your synagogue can do for you, but what you can do for your synagogue. For that reason, synagogues should not be shy to say who they are and what they're about and what they believe in. And this is maybe the thing that bothers me most about the Bethsedic generation's membership. The ad says, you're Jewish or you self-define as Jewish, come join for free. But it says nothing about Bethsedic itself, its values, its identity. We are a pluralistic and diverse Jewish community. All of our synagogues are not the same. Don't you, Bethsedic, have beliefs, principles? Before people join, don't you want to make sure they share those beliefs and principles? If not, then you're not a synagogue, you're just a Jewish community center. If you don't have core beliefs and principles, you are just a castle built on a cloud. The Park Avenue Synagogue in New York, for example, has an excellent statement of community commitments and principles. Different principles than the ones I would define for Beth Tikvah, but nonetheless, I love the fact that they say who they are, what they're about. And if you want to join, make sure that these beliefs are in accordance with yours, or you just won't feel comfortable here. They call it the Park Avenue Synagogue Community Covenant. And by having the courage to say, we expect things from you if you join here, not we expect nothing from you, I think it has strengthened their community tremendously. I could go on, but I think I've said enough and gotten myself into enough trouble. Friends, this is the time for synagogue membership renewal. You know that it's been a very difficult number of years for synagogues, and sadly, many people have drifted away. Nonetheless, we have not stopped doing the important work that synagogues do and have always done. It is not work that makes the headlines, but we are transmitting Judaism to the next generation. We haven't stopped supporting people in their losses. We haven't stopped providing meaning and joy to their simchas, connecting people with their heritage, converting people to Judaism, marrying new couples, creating community, preserving and enhancing Jewish music, helping the poor, comforting the sick, reaching out to the lonely, teaching Torah, promoting love of Israel, because these are things we care about, and because these things cost money, we have this thing called a synagogue membership contribution. I know the model is broken and in desperate need of revision. If you are undergoing financial struggles and want to be part of a shul, there is not a synagogue I know of that won't have compassion and allow you to pay what you can pay to become a member. But if you do have the resources and just don't want to pay the reasonable tax-deductible contribution to support any of this, including the security officer protecting your very lives and the lives of your friends in a dangerous world that we live in, I would say very respectfully, check yourself. It's the month of Elul, the month of self-reflection. If this is all worth nothing to you, check yourself, reflect. What does it say about you? What does it say about the things you care about? As you pull up to Beth in your BMW with your Lululemon pants and your Starbucks in hand, what does it say to you as you're taking advantage of that free membership? What message are you sending to your children? What message are you putting out there in the world? We read this morning, if there is a needy person among you, patoach tiftoach et yadecha. Open your hand. Why the doubling? Says the Baal HaTurim, to teach that even when the needy don't ask, you still give. Give anyway. That's the spirit that animates Judaism. This is a religion about generosity, not entitlement. It is a religion about contributing, not freeloading, of covenant, not fee for service, of equality and inclusion, not indignity and indifference. May the new year be a good year for this synagogue and for all of our synagogues in Toronto and everywhere, and with your commitment and with your membership, I know it will be. Shabbat Shalom and Ḥodesh Tov.